All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the September Solidarity meeting. Meeting of Solidarity Lowell, September 22nd, 2024. This meeting is being recorded. You can send to the recording by remaining here. This meeting will be put on YouTube as well as played on LTC by staying in the meeting you consent. To speak, please use the raise hand function on Zoom or type a star into the chat. I'm your moderator tonight, Mitch Pollan. The timekeeper is Amy Baranowski. Please be mindful of time limits. The stacker is Srayvon Yet. Captions are available. Remember to step up and step back. Assume positive intentions. If your words do cause a hurt, ouch, and be accountable, oops. And remember to speak slowly. Our agenda for this evening. It's 5:30. It's now 5:30, 5:35 or 5:36. Brief attendee intros and acknowledgement. 5:40. Solidarity Lowell intro, news and committee updates. 5:50. Allied organizations. 6 o'clock is the featured speaker, John Cohn from Progressive Mass, talking about the ballot questions, and 6:55 as a wrap up. So getting to know everybody, introduce yourself, your name, your pronouns, where you live, and where's the best place you've ever traveled. So let's get going. Chris.
Chris Opperman, she, her pronouns. I live downtown Lowell, and the best place I ever traveled to was Machu Picchu in Peru.
Marissa.
Hi, Marissa DuPont, she, her, hers. I live in South Lowell, and the best place I've traveled is Bavaria, Germany.
Srayvon.
Hi, I'm Trayvon, she or her. I live in Bike Central. The best place I travel maybe back to my country, Cambodia.
Felix.
Hello, my name is Felix. I use he and they pronouns. I live in downtown Lowell, and the best place I've traveled is Harpers Ferry, West Virginia.
Victoria.
Victoria Voice, downtown Lowell, she, her. I can't even remember the last time I was on vacation. I used to live in St. Croix. That's in the U.S. Virgin Islands. That's a great place.
Neat. Amy.
Hey, Amy Baranowski, she, her, hers, live in that weird part that's the acre downtown-ish. Best place I've traveled to, I've been thinking all day, I can't decide between Amsterdam and New Orleans. So
Ryan Hammond.
Yeah, my name is Ryan Hammond. I live with Amy in the acre. My pronouns are he, him. And I have a short list of strong candidates, but my favorite right now in my head might be Houghton Hancock in the Keweenaw Peninsula of Michigan.
Paul.
Paul Godet, he, him. I live in the Highlands in Tyler Park area, and toss up between Aruba and Paris.
Hey. Joe Boyle.
Hi everyone, this is Joe Boyle. He, him. I live in the Highlands. I would say my favorite place I've traveled is actually Washington, D.C.
Hey. Ryan Oates.
Hi, I'm Ryan Oates, he, him. I'm in Pawtucketville, and best place I've traveled, I'll say a recent one. On my honeymoon, we went to Turkey.
Neat. All right. Everyone just got reordered, so give me a second here. Stephen Davis.
Yep. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So hi everyone. Name's Steve. He, him, his. I live in Lowell, right in the downtown part of Lowell on Gorham Street. Best place to travel. This is probably gonna sound quite a bit off of the beaten path, but a couple years ago I took a trip to Haiti to help out a friend's school there, and that was obviously a very different experience, but really amazing experience for me.
Okay. John Grossman.
John Grossman, he, him, Lowell, Pawtucketville. Best place I ever traveled, Big Tree National Forest in California.
Nice. John Cohn.
So just coming off mute and off on video. Jonathan Cohn, he, him, his, joining from Boston in the South End. And I, not to steal Marissa's answer, but I probably would say Bavaria as well. Particularly visiting Neuschwanstein was just really cool. Like a family trip of Austria and Southern Germany a long, long time ago.
Nice. All right, Todd.
Hi, Todd Wheeler, he, him, Pawtucketville, and always happy to go back to Montreal.
All right, Karen.
Who?
Hello, Karen.
Oh, hi. Yeah, my name's Karen, she, her. I live in Lowell, and the best place I've traveled was a long time ago, but California, different parts. I just love California.
All right. Of course, I'm your moderator this evening, Mitch Pollan. I use he, him. I live in the Acre in Lowell. Probably one of the neatest places I've ever traveled was I really like the White Mountains in New Hampshire. All right. Land acknowledgement. So we're going to back out because we have a new text for this. Here in Lowell, we stand on the land of the Wabanaki, Pentucket, Agawam, and Pennacook. We must acknowledge that the land of Lowell is that of the Pennacook. However, if acknowledging the Pennacook as sovereign of this land is complex and not the entire story, after rampant colonization carried out through genocide, biological warfare, slavery, and other inhumane methods, the Pennacook were no longer present in Lowell by the 18th century. This in no way means there is no longer any Native American presence in Lowell, nor that there hasn't always been. Local indigenous peoples will refer to themselves as Pawtucket, Abenaki, Wampanoag, or Pennacook, indicating the long and intricate history of this place. This is also a place where multiple indigenous peoples over time have called their home. Massachusetts is unique in its indigenous history, known as one of the first places where colonizers settled in North America. This also means that this is one of the first places where indigenous people were confronted with colonial violence. The current Native American population in Massachusetts, including Lowell, is a testament to the resilience of indigenous people, as well as their venerated connection to the land here. Only when we acknowledge this land and its history properly are we able to understand an adequate method of recovering from an unjust past. This is why we begin with the statement. We ask that you educate yourself further on the indigenous presence and contributions to Lowell, whether you consider or wherever you consider your home, as not the burden of these indigenous populations to educate us and earn our respect. We are living on a land that was stolen, and by educating ourselves and connecting with our local indigenous groups and organizations, we can together work on creating more equitable and realistic community that works for us all. With this acknowledgement, we hope that these facts will be influential and present in working towards a better reality. All right. What is Solidarity Lowell? Solidarity Lowell is a volunteer group of Greater Lowell community members working towards social justice by defending the rights, dignity, and equality of all against hate and discrimination. We welcome new members. Solidarity Lowell Coordinating Committee is your elected team of volunteers running the meetings, organizing events, disseminating relevant news, and sharing calls to action. The SLCC members you can waive. Coordinating Committee elections are held in April. Solidarity Lowell is a chapter of Progressive Massachusetts, a statewide, member-driven grassroots organization committed to fighting for a vision of shared prosperity, racial and social justice, good governance, and environmental sustainability in Massachusetts. Please visit progressivemass.com or contact us or John Cohn, who's from the organization this evening, after the meeting to learn more. The Merrimack Solidarity Lowell is a Merrimack Valley Project affiliate. The Merrimack Valley Project works towards improving the quality of life in the Valley communities by organizing to save and create jobs of dignity and decent wages, bring about reinvestment and economic revitalization, and to save and create affordable housing and identify and pursue other issues related to the welfare of the Valley. Visit merrimackvalleyproject.org or contact us after the meeting to learn more. Do we have a new person here?
No, I left and rejoined.
Okay. Victories. Solidarity endorsed Tara Hong won his primary for state representative of the 18th Middlesex State House District, defeating incumbent Roddy Mom and Andrew Kolar. Congratulations, Tara. Progressive Mass endorsed Allison Cartwright, declared victory over Boston City Councilor Aaron Murphy in the Democratic primary for clerk at the Supreme Judicial Court of Suffolk County. Mayor Dolan defeated 13-term incumbent Marilyn Tito Devaney for the 3rd Governor's Council district, which covers much of the area northwest of Boston, including Lowell area, Chelmsford and Billerica. Majority of the approximately 1,000 employees at GM Ultium Cells electric vehicle battery plant in Spring Hill, Tennessee have signed union cards to join United Auto Workers, and the company has agreed to recognize the union. Sarah McBride of Delaware will be the first trans person nominated for U.S. Congress. Does anyone else have any good news they'd like to share?
I do, if you don't mind.
Yep.
Just one thing I just wanted to jump in. I apologize. I can't stay personally for the entire meeting, but just I just texted everyone on the group chat here. There's going to be a film screening of a really excellent film about the Gaza-Israel conflict coming up, and we'd love to see folks from Solidarity Lowell attend. The film is called Gaza. It came out in 2019. It's a really moving film by a couple Irish documentarians about the lives of ordinary people in Gaza. And the film screening is going to be this coming October 6th, 7 p.m. at the Luna Theater in downtown Lowell. And like I was just saying, I did just send you I put out the poster in the group chat, which we are planning to do a bunch of flyering around Lowell, just to get the word out about this information. And I just full disclosure, pretty much this film is being sponsored by Boston DSA, Boston Democratic Socialists of America. And there's another activist organization here in this area, Lowell for Palestine, that's been active for about the past year or so, that's also working with us to sponsor the screening. So again, I just wanted to bring this to the attention of the group. The screening, the film itself, it's going to be free admission, open to everyone in the public, but donations are welcome. And yeah, we're really just hoping to bring people together from this community for the event, and just to kind of just raise awareness about the situation in Gaza first and foremost. And also after the film screening, we're planning to do a brief Q&A about the film and talk about other opportunities for activism, solidarity with Palestine kind of going forward. So I just wanted to get that information out there. Again, it'll be this October 6th, this is a Sunday, 7 p.m. at the Luna Theater. And if anyone has any questions or anything like that, I also just put my email in the chat, just as an FYI.
All right, well, thanks, Stephen.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thank you.
All right, Felix.
Yes, I love that you said that, Stephen, because it's a great segue into my victory. Large win for the BDS movement in Massachusetts. The MIT MITSI program, that's the International Science and Technology Initiatives program. Israel Lockheed Martin's seed fund has ended and will not renew its contract amidst constant pressure from students and staff of Conscious, meaning that the MITSI program will no longer receive funds or supply labor and skills regarding the parties of the seed fund. The MIT Coalition for Palestine says no science for apartheid.
All right. Thanks, Felix. Anyone else? All right. Emergency Housing Coalition, Marissa.
Hi, everyone. So there's a whole bunch of us who are part of the Emergency Housing Coalition. I just happen to be organizing the particular thing that's happening this week, so that's why I'm talking about this. But the coalition is a joint effort between LAMA, Merrimack Valley Project, and Solidarity Lowell, and we're advocating for humane treatment of our unhoused neighbors and for affordable housing. This slide is... I told them to leave it because I don't know what's happening. So basically, we have a little issue with the location tomorrow. So we might be meeting at Brood Awakenings tomorrow at 1, or we might be meeting at Brood Awakenings Tuesday at 5. So if you are interested in attending and you are available on either of those times, please shoot me an email and I'll get you on the list so that way we can figure out when it's going to be. Right now, it looks like the folks who have emailed me have said that it sounds like tomorrow at 1 at Brood Awakenings is going to be the time and location. So if that works for you, that's probably when it's going to be, but we'll see. If we meet on Tuesday, we'll have more time with her. So I don't know, we'll see. But we're going to discuss Lowell's treatment of the unhoused population, our efforts in the past between us and LAMA and Merrimack Valley Project, specifically in trying to create warming and cooling centers, and then our ultimate goal of permanent shelter and housing for everyone. And yeah, we had a planning session on Friday, so our agenda is set, but if you want to attend and just support, we'd really appreciate it. Again, you can email me, marissa@solidaritylowell.com. Thank you.
Right. Rapid response team. So you can attend Thursday's Lowell Housing Action Meeting. Lowell Alliance is organizing residents of Lowell who are struggling with the rising cost of living. Join us on Thursday, September 26th, 5:30 to 8 o'clock p.m. at Christchurch United, 180 East Merrimack Street in Lowell. We'll share housing experiences in Lowell and talk about how to make Lowell a more affordable city where residents can thrive. Dinner, childcare, and Spanish interpretation will be provided. If you want to take action and talk to neighbors about how we can make change, join us on September 26th. Reach out to Liz at that or the email address there at 774-275-7398. If you want to help with Legally RRT newsletter or have an item to include, email rrt@solidaritylowell.com. Upcoming events. The next Emergency Housing Coalition meeting is Monday, September 30th at 7 p.m. on Zoom. You can email contact@solidaritylowell.com for the link. A DD&D will happen on October 18th, 6 p.m. at the Ladd and Whitney Monument. Join us to stand out for voter turnout. At 7 p.m., we will head to a local resident to dine and discuss. Mill City Messaging, our social postcarding event, is on Thursday, October 10th at from 6 to 8 p.m. at Lala Books at 189 Market Street in Lowell in downtown. Election Day is Tuesday, November 5th. Don't forget to vote. The Merrimack Valley Project Micah Dinner is on Sunday, November 17th. Save that date. Mill City Messaging, Amy?
Yeah, not too much more to add from what you already said, but it's always the second Thursday of the month, so it's going to be October 10th, 6 to 8 p.m. Over at our friends Lala Books, 189 Market Street. And yeah, so we had been focusing on local races, but now that those are over, we're going to move into either state level or national. I'm not sure yet, but we'll have some good causes to write about then. So bring a snack and refreshments and come and hang out and write postcards with us. And
Right.
Amy at solidaritylowell.com if you have any questions.
All right, thanks, Amy. Demonstrate, dine, and discuss.
I will tell people that our next Demonstrate, Dine, and Discuss event is October 18th at 6 p.m. We'll do a standout for voter turnout for the November 5th general election. For Tara Hong for state rep. Also, we'll be showing up for Eunice Ziegler and Ed Kennedy. After the standout, we'll head to a local restaurant. We haven't chosen yet, but if you want help plan the event or make signs, contact me, Ryan at solidaritylowell.com.
All right, LA group announcements. Has anyone from, I know we got one already from Boston TSA. Any other announcements folks have? One. Paul?
I just wanted to add about the Micah dinner on Sunday, November 17th. It was originally going to be almost a whole day, and now we're reducing it to like a 4-hour block of time at Northern Nexus Community College, probably from 4 to 8 will be the block of
Okay.
time.
That's in Haverhill, right?
In Haverhill.
Okay. All right, anyone else?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Yep.
I'm on the Lowell Sustainability Council, and I've been working on an ordinance to ban styrofoam in the city, like styrofoam food containers. And I've got like a draft going. So if anyone wants to reach out, I'll throw my email in the chat if you want to take a look at it, give any feedback. And eventually we'll send it to the city council to see if anyone would pick it up.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. All right.
And sorry, I apologize. This is to Steve Davis here again. I
Yeah.
did need to go. My apologies, everyone. But just again, if there is anyone who's interested at all in possibly helping out with flyering for this Gaza film on September 6th, again, I'm just dropping my email in the chat. Please let me know anytime. Like we're saying, we definitely want to get decent coverage for the flyers up around the UML campus and Lowell for the film screening. So if anyone wants to get in touch with me, please just email me anytime. And again, thanks so much for the meeting. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
All right, Jonathan Cohn is the Policy Director of Progressive Massachusetts, here to talk tonight about the fact that we will have 5 questions on the general election ballot in November. Jonathan Cohn is a co-founder of the Issues Committee and Elections Committee at Progressive Massachusetts and has chaired both since 2017. He has expanded the reach of the organization's legislative agenda and candidate questionnaires and has represented Progressive Mass and statewide advocacy coalitions on voting rights, immigrants' rights, and economic justice. He's a professional editor with a focus on global sustainability and 20th century political history. Please type your questions in the chat or use the raise hand function in Zoom. Before we need to go on any further here, let's have Jonathan.
Awesome, great to be here. And can I have screen sharing power so that I put together a slide deck to both to keep me focused as I talk about the 5 different ballot questions.
Yes, absolutely. I'm sorry, guys, I forgot how to do that.
Mitch, soon as you unshare,
Yep.
Jonathan can share.
All right, we'll do so.
Okay, thank you. I'll give a quick shout out to I no longer have the balloon background, sadly, but I have this nice like boo and vote closet curtain that a friend made for me. A little bit of backstory to that before I dive into the presentation stems back from if folks spend too much time on Twitter like I do, there had been a trend like years ago of people adapting their name around Halloween to have like the spooky versions of their name. I couldn't come up with any creative rendition of either my first name or my last name. But since Halloween falls during like peak GOTV season, I ended up using that as a spin on the kind of common Obama line of don't boo, vote, because I believe in doing both. That I want to be able to like protest the things that I don't like, but then also will turn out people to vote and make sure that I do as well in every election that I can. So it's nice to have that as a visual aid. Now, but I put together some slides to talk about the ballot questions that we have this year. Feel free as I'm going to drop questions in the chat and I'll answer them either during or at the end. We have 5 statewide ballot questions. I'm going to go through them 1 through 5 with some overview about what they are, trying to keep each one from going too long because I know I can talk too much and that there are 5 of them. So feel free to chime in with questions if there's anything that you want me to dive into more for any of these. Okay, so just general overviews to keep in mind. Election day, it's Tuesday, November 5th. It is wild. Earlier this weekend, I realized that there are 5 weekends between this weekend and the weekend before the election. And that's kind of almost concerning how close that is. And the one thing to just think about as well, as we've seen, people start voting really early because of vote by mail in Massachusetts. People will probably start voting in early October. And since we have the various offices on the ballot, as well as 5 different questions, the ballot will be long. So it'll also be important to make sure that people vote the full ballot. It'll probably be not just 1 page. Both sides probably end up having a second sheet. I don't know if it's quite long enough for a third. We'll find out. So the five different questions. Again, I'm going to go through them in order. Question 1 is the question from the state auditor about State Auditor Diana DeZoglio about whether or not to clarify that the state auditor has the authority to audit the legislature. In context, that's something that kind of State Auditor Diana DeZoglio has talked about a lot as a way of increasing transparency. Last year, that's like far too long of a block of text on a PowerPoint, so I should have got that down. But Auditor Diana DeZoglio had sought to conduct an audit, as a note here, related to budgetary, hiring, spending, and procurement information, some information about active and pending legislation, kind of among other things about the legislature, and the Speaker and Senate President just kind of immediately refused. When it comes to legislature, I'll just make a quick shout out as well to several years ago. One of the only pieces of legislation I've ever been involved in directly writing was one that former Senator Sonia Chang Diaz and former Representative Tammy Gouveia filed for me, which was an act related to the relative to the purpose, utility, nature, and timeliness of commissions in the Commonwealth, the Punt Act, which would have had the auditor do a study to what extent legislative created commissions actually do anything and to what extent that they're representative or other things as well. It got a hearing, which I wasn't even informed about, but I'm just so happy that that bill got filed and got a piece in WGBH and is an example of something that the auditor should be able to do. With this, Desaglo has argued that the office already has powers to conduct such audits, putting to past audits of the legislature that happened, some of which happened as recently as a few decades ago, but also a much longer history in the history of the office of the auditor being able to audit things from the legislature that might not get down to like all the granular details of the legislature, because like a performance audit of the legislature is hard to base kind of on standards, but there's still a lot of basic things that should fall under the auditors, should fall under a purview on like a basic good government framework. Because of that that debate between her and then Speaker Ron Mariano and Senate President Karen Spilka, Desaglo filed the ballot initiative to clarify that that power exists, because whether or not she has that power has been under contention. We also, as kind of a backdrop of this, is that we're a lead. Massachusetts is a leader on many good things, but we're also a leader in how untransparent our state government is. Due to recent progress in Michigan, that took them out of this kindred space with us, we are the only state in the US where all three branches of state government claim full exemptions from public records law. Which is always a striking contrast to the way in which on the local level, cities and towns have to be very careful to abide by open meeting law, and the legislature has like no rules governing them really on transparency, whatever. And this would be a kind of a good and kind of modest step forward to kind of creating more accountability there. Question two. Is about replacing the use of the MCAS as a high school graduation requirement. If you didn't go to school here in Massachusetts, for context, the MCAS is that term refers to the state standardized test. And Massachusetts is one of only 8 states in the entire country that ties graduation to a specific standardized test that students take. And here it's the 10th grade version of the test. What question 2 would do, it would kind of replace that, and as most states do, tie graduation to successful completion of coursework that adheres to state standards. We know that the best way to assess what students are doing is through the regular assessments that teachers do in the classroom. Any of you who've known that teachers do many assessments of you all throughout the year up until the very moment that you graduate. And that's a better way of capturing both any timestamp of students, but also as they progress and develop and learn throughout their whole kind of school career. Creating high stakes with standardized testing is something that has proven to increase student anxiety. And as many teachers have noted, it can lead to a narrowing of the curricula, because what we measure and what we kind of put particularly what we create high stakes with, the measuring, it will have a lot of impact on all of the decisions. And that many teachers have complained about how test prep can end up cannibalizing the curriculum as it crowds out time for other learning and teaching things like critical thinking skills and creative projects in many ways that can help broaden students' education and make it a much more well-rounded experience. One thing that I was thinking recently is that at the end of the day, the only time that that a multiple choice test is really something you engage with after school is on the ballot box, and high stakes testing does not prepare you for that version of multiple choice testing. That with this, the kind of our use of a kind of a graduation requirement based on a specific set of high stakes tests is something that has disproportionately harmed Black and Latinx students, English language learners, low income students, and students with disabilities. Teachers have often spoken of students who've come over from other countries and then immediately have to take a set of tests in English and then keep taking them over and over again if they don't pass on the first time. With those retests taking away from actually teaching them in the subsequent time, such that that really does go against the way of thinking of how you want to prepare students all the way through their education and then set them up for success as they leave in 12th grade. That the graduation requirement of kind of using that specific standardized test has also failed to reduce educational inequities in Massachusetts. Massachusetts tends to rank near the top when it comes to kind of educational performance because we are a high income state. That's kind of that median income has a correlation with the highest performing states. But because we're also a heavily unequal state, despite being a comparatively high income state, we also have some of the worst kind of income inequality, or some of the worst educational inequality in the state. And one thing that we've seen, and it's no surprise, is that the best way of closing those gaps is through funding. That when Massachusetts kind of started providing greater funding for under-resourced school districts, that those gaps started changing, but having kind of a high stakes test hasn't done that. And as noted as well, the kind of MCAS itself only tests a narrow range of skills. It's only even a few subjects that students learn, but then doesn't cover the full range of skills that we would want students to have for college, career, active citizenship. And having it based on the kind of the complete coursework set to what the courses that the state wants students to take gives that more well-rounded picture of students' educational experience and kind of eliminates the kind of phenomena of where students could actually do well in all of their courses and not be able to graduate because they missed by a few points on a specific set of tests. So question 3. Question 3 is about question 3 would give Uber and Lyft drivers the option to form a union and to collectively bargain for better wages and working conditions. Some bit of context in here. Actually, to go back, little context, question 2, the main backer of question 2 is the Mass Teacher Association, but many other kind of unions and community groups. Question 3, main backer is SEIU 32BJ and the International Association of Machinists, but a number of community backers as well. That in the context for this, Massachusetts has 55,000 Uber drivers and 35,000 Lyft drivers. I don't know if those stats cover those who fall in both categories or not, but that this is something that's come about, particularly with the rise of both of them in recent years, has been something that has led to a major issue because Uber and Lyft classify their drivers as independent contractors, and because of that, they lack many workplace protections that many other workers would have, as well as they bear significant costs, particularly the cost of the car and the car insurance and the gas. And because of those costs that drivers bear, in the fact that they're pretty much not paid for time when they're not actively driving, many drivers end up with a take-home pay below the minimum wage. Because of this situation, there had been a lawsuit from the Massachusetts Attorney General's office on Uber and Lyft. And that existence of that lawsuit was why Uber and Lyft have been trying their own ballot question for a number of years. Their ballot questions are not on the ballot this year. The settlement between the Attorney General and Uber and Lyft improved pay and benefits for drivers, but it did punt on the issue of misclassification and said that issue can't be relitigated in the courts for 5 years. That through the settlement, the drivers were able to secure higher minimum pay, access to benefits like health insurance, earned sick time and paid leave, anti-discrimination protections, an appeals process for deactivation, since drivers could be suddenly be locked out of their accounts without any real form of due process. However, despite the benefits that this brought drivers, that Uber and Lyft like to tout in their ads, trying to make themselves look good, things that they only did because of a lawsuit, they will still need to be held to abide by their part of this deal in the typical way that we can to have accountability in the workplace to make sure that kind of workers are getting the pay, the benefits, kind of the respect and the voice they need is through a union and through that ability to collectively bargain. I can say I don't trust Uber and Lyft to be a good part of this deal without some counter pressure on them. So that's question 3 would then create the ability to have a union structure for drivers. It would be kind of through a series of if there are 5% of active drivers supporting a unionization effort, or of active drivers defined as drivers with above median trips, the union organizers could kind of get closer to kind of unionization by getting access to the contact info for drivers. Once it gets to a quarter of active drivers, the union could be an official bargaining representative. But we need like a simple majority of drivers, in this case, with more than 100 trips in the last quarter, a bargaining kind of a contract with Uber and Lyft could be approved. And question 3 also creates a process for mediation and binding arbitration if no agreement is reached. It's something that's kind of particularly because of the way in which they are, because of the lawsuit punting on this issue, still classified as independent contractors, needs to go around that to be able to create a process to give them the right to collectively bargain and improve their conditions at the workplace in a field that's been notoriously exploitative for the drivers. Okay, moving on, and I'm talking fast, so if you have questions, don't hesitate, trying to keep this moving and give the balance to questions. Question 4 is about legalizing psychedelics. A yes vote would allow a group of naturally occurring psychedelic drugs. Psilocybin, that's the kind of the key ingredient in quote, quote, magic mushrooms. Kind of psilocin, mescaline, which is, why am I blanking out of what mescaline is the active ingredient in? It's the kind of DMT and ibogaine, to be grown, shared, used at home, and offered by licensed professionals in a more clinical setting. What it does, as a note here, create a regulated framework for supervised use with trained facilitators at licensed psychedelic therapy centers. Does decriminalize that. My criminal penalties for limited use decriminalized. I don't know what I was doing there. I think I messed. I need to fix that line. It decriminalizes, eliminates penalties for limited personal use. I think I put criminal instead of eliminate, and I don't understand how, although they share a few letters. It does require participants to undergo safety screenings prior to receiving psychedelic therapy services. But it does not legalize retail sales. So that's different in the way in which question 4, back in 2016, if you were here in Massachusetts, on legalizing recreational marijuana, created a system of kind of cannabis stores that we have now. Question 4 on psychedelics would not do that and would have it more kind of in a more regulated framework. What question 4 then does first begins by creating an expert advisory board to issue recommendations on patient safety, public education, training requirements, affordable and culturally responsive access, and program evaluation, and then creates a commission to oversee it. Again, in this case, akin to question 4 back in 2016, creating a commission to oversee cannabis. This creates a commission to oversee and regulate this legalization process, and then afterwards with a set of kind of annual reporting. That is a little bit of a background timing as well. Back in 2018 was when the FDA granted kind of a breakthrough therapy designation to psilocybin. And that's been kind of used in a number, particularly with the Veterans Administration, of using that for research, because as kind of at the bottom, these kind of naturally occurring psychedelics have had in research proven benefits in mental health treatment, particularly for things like alcohol abuse, major depression, and severe anxiety, as well as post-traumatic stress disorder, which is why there's been a lot of interest over the years from the Veterans Administration in seeing how this can be useful for people suffering from PTSD, but also in other kind of cases noted here, like particularly people with depression, high anxiety issues for which medications prescribed to them have not worked or indeed have had negative side effects. This is something that studies have shown can be helpful for them. In other states like Oregon and Colorado have passed similar laws, creating a regulatory framework. If something has had kind of science-backed kind of benefits, it makes sense to not put it in a kind of criminal framework and instead have it on kind of a regulatory framework where people can use it, but it's in a kind of a controlled, accountability, also taxed framework. Question 5 is kind of the one fair wage question. It would phase in an increase to the tipped wage so that it reaches the full minimum wage by 2029. As noted here, although we back in 2018 were able to raise the minimum wage in Massachusetts to $15 an hour, the tipped wage remains only $6.75. That is higher than the national standard, and I'm always appalled by how the national standard is still below $3, and also that the national minimum, like kind of federal minimum wage, is only $7.25. But that's another story. But that $6.75 is still too low. That employers are expected to cover the gap between that $6.75 if tips don't cover it. However, because of that framework, that wage theft is rampant in the restaurant industry because of that dependency on closing that gap. As noted here and reported in the one study I linked to on the next page from the Economic Policy Institute, in investigations of over 9,000 restaurants, the Department of Labor found that 84% were in violation of wage and hour laws. So because of this system of a tipped wage, we can see that kind of wage theft, one of the most common and least prosecuted crimes, is very common in that industry, and making sure that workers get kind of a fair wage standard helps kind of to push back against that. In states that have enacted kind of a one fair wage standard, places like California, Washington, and then a number of other states in the kind of in the mountain area, kind of mountain west of the US, the poverty rate for restaurant workers is much lower than it is much lower. And data has also showed that tipped workers' median hourly pay, so the combination of wages and tips, is significantly higher in one fair wage states. We've also seen as one of the key reasons for the importance of moving away from such a heavy dependence on tips as a system is that rates of sexual harassment are high in the restaurant industry due to the power imbalance that dependence on tips creates. And there was an interesting study once that actually did look at how customers interact based on how dependent the workers are on tips. That this is notes as well, restaurant owners have been complaining that this is going to destroy them, which has not actually happened in states that have passed one fair wage. They have seen growth in employment in the restaurant industry as well as growth in the number of establishments. So that kind of fear mongering has not borne out by an actual reality. Of this kind of map here of highlighting the states that have done this, could be in California, Nevada, Oregon, Washington, Montana, Minnesota, and Nebraska, and Alaska. So it's happened in a number of states. Those kind of light green are ones where there are efforts underway. And one thing that's also kind of interesting with this is that when you look at how much people tip in different states, in states that have moved to one fair wage, tipping rates remain basically the same, but it's now but workers are not just kind of dependent on tips to close that gap. That at the end of the day, tipping is a cultural practice in the US, so people still do it for good service. I was thinking the other day about this and that I don't tip different rates in different states, and I don't actually know how much people are getting paid. And so people would likely still end up tipping that 15 to 20%, which means that workers will still benefit from the tips that customers give, but that's going to be a kind of a gratuity for good service rather than having tips be what customers have to pay to subsidize the low wages that employers are paying their employees. Okay, so that is my slide deck that I finished in less than 30 minutes because I wanted to prevent myself from going over. But I am happy to answer any questions that folks had during this about more explanation of anything on this, things that you're interested in learning more about, or questions that you might have about how to get involved. Okay, Paul.
I'm particularly interested in question 2. I'm a retired teacher, and you should know, everybody should know that both the MTA, Massachusetts Teachers Association, and American Federation of Teachers Massachusetts have both endorsed question 2. I taught elementary school in music, so I didn't have to deal with the MCAS test, but I heard the complaints from teachers over and over again about how it skews the curriculum and it's discriminatory and takes up so much time, and the pressure from superintendents and principals to keep raising the MCAS scores. So it's a pernicious kind of system, and totally unnecessary. And the other thing that's, I think, misunderstood is that question 2 does not eliminate the test. People will still be required to take the test. You can compare apples to apples with other communities and so on, but no student will be punished, as you say, of high stakes for if they fail it.
Exactly. That's such an important thing because like the test can be a diagnostic tool. You can still kind of look at that as information, but it's also the way that it uses now, it kind of misplaced is kind of a warped version of accountability where a diagnostic tool is useful, not on like the individualized basis, but looking at overall in districts, and you're basically punishing students if like the district is kind of basically under-resourced, rather than making sure that all districts have what they need and having a more holistic way of measuring students. I know, and this is like something that for fixing kind of assessments in other ways in the future, I know some folks I know in education policy have complained about how the way that MCAS is designed is also not even helpful for teachers looking to improve their students, because you don't even get the results from the students in your class or like until after they're in your class. So it doesn't even work in the way in which the regular assessments that happen throughout the year are able to better guide teaching as well.
I know, Paul, you're probably more knowledgeable about this. That wasn't the MCAS was created in the early 90s, wasn't it, as a diagnostic tool? And then
93, I think, it was part of education reform bill.
Yeah,
statewide.
and then its use expanded to include being a graduation requirement in the early aughts, if I remember right. Is that
yeah? So there's, and I can drop in. There's a good report studying that Citizens for Public Schools did before, that they based kind of that there was, as Paul kind of noted, there had been a kind of education reform package that happened in the 90s that led to both the kind of that changed the funding for schools. It was what ultimately had to be updated back with the Student Opportunity Act a few years ago, where they addressed some of the inequities in funding in response to a lawsuit. But that also was led to the creation of MCAS, and eventually over time going into effect, I think in like the late 1990s or early, I think it's the early aughts. The report has that in particular, that the MCAS as a graduation requirement, which had gotten phased in kind of over time. And as Citizens for Public Schools notes in that study, that during the period in which districts got more, the districts that were under-resourced got more money, you actually did start to see those gaps closing. But in the years where we've had the test has been used as a graduation requirement, that's never actually closed gaps between schools.
All right, Amy?
Yeah, so switching to question 5. I'm just, so, you go to, I swear every time I eat out lately, the restaurant is, say no to 5. And there's one where all of the, our waitress even had a t-shirt that said, say no to 5. And I'm not saying in all circumstances, obviously, if they're work. It's not the right time to do it. But I guess I'm struggling with how to push back rather than a vague sense of it's just fear mongering. And of course, your employer has a very vested interest in this. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like, what can is there like a study or something I can point to? Or I mean, what's your recommended response in these situations?
Yeah, like I'm happy to drop in, and I can share in the slide deck. I have the one I can drop it, I think, in the chat, one study that looks at the result of this. I think it is, since it is largely a restaurant industry funded opposition, I do think that's a number of people who are afraid that if this happened, that people would stop tipping. And that so they believe that are afraid that their take-home pay would go away. And I think that largely the employers are probably telling them that this is what would happen. But that hasn't been the case in states that have done this. It can be difficult, particularly when people are kind of in that state of, let's say, fear or anxiety about their economic future, to kind of engage on this. I know that the campaign itself has begun doing some organizing among servers to help, and I think that is some of the best ways of pushing back against that. So having other people in kind of who are workers in the restaurant industry talking to their peers about kind of to dispel the myths, kind of the myths about this that are making people afraid of what would happen. Yeah, because it's been on. I don't eat out too often, so I haven't seen this, but I've heard out from so many people about how much the opposition is already very present in just like in any restaurant people go to.
Yeah, and the other big one I heard was, well, they're gonna have to raise the prices, and the restaurant's gonna go out of business, and then I won't have a job. That was a big one that they were saying.
Yeah, and that the thing that I pointed out as well, when you think about the costs of kind of costs that are involved with kind of a restaurant, again, a good share of the cost is going to be fixed. Not just the labor cost, it kind of is significant, but you also the things that I've known restaurants to go out of business before have not been like a minimum wage increase, but have been real estate. Like an example being like I have a cousin who, it wasn't like a kind of a huge sit down place. I had a cousin who owned a bakery and cafe in Philadelphia, and the reason that ended up closing was because he simply couldn't afford how expensive Philadelphia real estate had gotten. And we can do things to help address those kind of large fixed costs that can be pushing on restaurants. But if you have good food, people will want to, in a good atmosphere, people will continue to come to the restaurant. And the increase, like places where I have this, you don't suddenly see a giant leap in costs. Prices might go up like $1 on a menu, but then even that they go up all the time, and people like buy modest amounts, and people still go. If you compare the prices that you pay at restaurants now to the prices that you paid 20 years ago, they're probably higher, and you probably have not noticed in fall.
Yeah, I was a pizza delivery guy for years, and it was an interesting question for me to consider. I mean, I collected signatures for it, even though I had my doubts about it. But you make a good case for it. Ryan.
Thank you. And I'll go shout out to Ryan for dropping into the chat the kind of another helpful link about the issue of one fair wage. Quickly about in terms of and I'll get to Ryan, your question in a sec, in terms of who's funding different campaigns. I know question one, I know some of the money has been from DeZoglio's own campaign account. I forget who from the report where the other kind of there are a few other individuals who donated some large amounts of money, and then I think some small donors. Two has largely been funded by the Mass Teacher Association. Question three was largely SAIU 32BJ and the National Association of the Machinists. Four, I think it had some. Four, I think had an array. I haven't looked at those recently. I know they had some pharmaceutical funding, and then some just like collection of large donors. The one that I remember finding fascinating was Eliza Dushku, Buffy the Vampire Slayer fame, was a donor to question 4. Question 5 is largely funded by One Fair Wage, which is the national organization that works around this kind of in a number of states. But Ryan, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I'll first say, yeah, I met some of you all when I was collecting signatures for one fair wage. So that was a time when I looked up a bunch of the information about that. And I saw actually that article that I had sent, they reference a study, or at least it's like a policy briefing from Brookings that talked about how people who earn the sub minimum wage have twice the rate of poverty than people who do not, which, I mean, it's a sub minimum wage, so it kind of makes sense. So if you're interested in that talking point, that's there.
Yeah.
But yeah, my question was, and partially for you, Jonathan, and then partially for the group, if there's like a point person in the area for organizing, I guess either for these individual campaigns, if they have like a point person for this region, and then for the group, if you all have like a person whose focus is to organize people around these campaigns. I don't know. So I would put those two questions to you all.
I can quick answer some and then hand it over to others to answer. One thing I can say, since Progressive Mass has formally endorsed all 5, I want us to have, and I can update people on this, have literature, like nice literature for that. But one thing that I know that with Progressive Mass we can offer, since as kind of an organization that has access to the voter file, we currently have survey questions for questions 2 and 5. So when I've organized some canvases kind of in and around Boston, recently have enabled people, if they want to do ID for 2 and 5. We've more recently endorsed 1, 3, and 4, and want to be able to offer people who the ability to ID voters for as many questions as they want to on the door, because we have the ability to do that in our voter files.
Great, thank you.
But in terms of other stuff, kind of locally, I'll defer to those kind of locally. I've seen some things posted, but if anybody wants to organize a canvas, I'm happy to help get you the materials that you need.
Ryan, I know that Merrimack Valley Project is organizing informational canvassing around the ballot questions. I don't know that there's anything formally organized in Lowell, perhaps the Lowell Democratic City Committee or Greater Lowell Area Democrats. They might be doing something. I am not 100% on either of that. So anybody who knows, please feel free to jump in.
Cool. All right. So let me know.
But yeah,
Oh, sorry.
No, if any of you want to, and I'm happy to get you get people lists that I can, where you can ID for multiple questions and figure out how to get people material. So just let me know. Paul.
The Merrimack Valley Project did some petitioning at the Bread and Roses Festival on the MCAS question.
Nice.
But we can't take on all 5, and we had to restrict to whatever people were willing to help fund
okay,
the effort. But Lowell Votes has produced a 1-page or 2 sides, which says what a yes vote means, what a no vote means, but it's pretty neutral. You know, it's just kind of says it establishes this commission or it doesn't establish this commission, you know. So we're going to be doing it at St. Patrick's Church closer to the election after the registration drive. MVP will be distributing voter information, and it'll be neutral that way because of our 501c3 status, of course, but that doesn't prevent us from talking to people who want to know, well, what do you think of this question? You know, my mother's a waitress for 15, 20 years, so I have that lived experience, as many of us have.
And the one thing I'd be also happy to provide if people are interested, I had put together that I'd used myself at some events recently, like basically a pledge sheet where people could say like that you can use for as many questions as you want. I'd used it for 2 and 5 at a few events recently where you can get people to say like that they're voting. I'm always happy to enter data for people. I do that while watching shows on Netflix or Hulu because I can't just look at the screen and like something else to modestly distract me while doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I would be in the market for signs, at the very least.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
Let
me see what I can do.
signs.
I think most people here would want some signs that have yards anyways, which are some of us.
I'll make a flag to see kind of where signs are and how they can get to people.
Yeah. Plus, there's a lot of popular sign locations around Lowell too. Like in front of businesses that host them.
Mhm.
I was just out dropping signs yesterday and the day before at, businesses that are, usually allow anyone to post stuff on their frontage. There's a bunch of places like that around town.
Nice.
So,
I think
just to
also at the bus station, it might be good too because the train station and the bus station they come together and a lot of folk come together.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, you can't post signs in that area, but it's,
I
someplace
think
where
the flyer might be good. Yeah.
yeah. It could be something
just to
interesting.
throw out, sorry, Mitchell.
Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
I might be interested in throwing together a canvas. If anyone, are there particular issues, like which question are people most passionate about? We can maybe narrow to like 2 at a time so that it's not too much.
Yeah.
Anyone particularly
If
passionate
you want to
about one?
organize a canvas, we will definitely support and promote it. In terms of what questions are the most, I mean, I kind of feel like question 1 isn't getting a lot of airplay right now. But obviously question 2 is super important and they are getting some opposition. So maybe those, but I don't know what other folks think.
I mean, my priorities are 1 through 3. Those are my top ones. Karen?
Yeah, hi, could you just clarify more, speaking of question 1, on the pros and cons? Because I'm not clear on that yet.
Sure. Any particular question, like particular things on that front?
The pros and cons. What's the benefits and what are the negatives for having that change? It didn't.
Yeah. So I would say, if you look at what's like opposition to question 1 and ends up saying, like the main opposition argument that you end up seeing from question 1 is people saying that it's like that it messes with the separation of powers. I'm gonna, as an argument in the state, my general answer to that is that there are certain things that I think an auditor will simply not be able to audit, right? That like some aspects of the black box of the Massachusetts legislature is not going to fall under the auditor's purview. But when it comes to things like just like the general finances of the legislature, where the legislature claims to have an independent auditor, which I just never trust people's own picking their own auditor. In that regard, that stuff, it's definitely is not messing with any degree of like kind of separation of powers. The auditor can't make them pass laws. It's not going to be, it would never be the type of performance audit that an auditor would be doing of a state department that has a specific mission statement. But you can definitely look at kind of things related to the distribution of funds. As well as like my noting before of how I would love to see the auditor actually look into kind of the legislative commissions that created and spending on them.
So it would make things more public. That's the point.
Yes.
Okay. Then has there been any evidence of anything negative so far with it not being public? Do you know what I mean? Where there's been investigations afterwards and found out that there was something nefarious going on or something like that?
And I think so that there have been a history, and I can't speak exactly to like the specific incidents that have been where the auditor has audited kind of the legislature. There are a few of them recently. Most of them were a number of decades ago. And I think a lot of the animating kind of reason for that, actually, I'd say one of the things that often DeZoglio has talked about wanting to see an audit the use of, which I think definitely shouldn't, it doesn't affect the legislator's ability to pass laws, is the legislature's spending on enforcement of non-disclosure agreements kind of with staff. That's something that's been an animating issue for DeZoglio as somebody who was forced to sign one of those herself when she was a staffer before she became a state senator, and then auditor. And that's something where it is the particular expenditure of state funds that is worthwhile thing to investigate that doesn't mess with a kind of a separation of powers argument of the legislature being able to legislate. I see Mitchell's hand up.
Yeah, I mean, my own take on it is, I mean, and is that the Massachusetts state legislature has has an array of accountability issues. I mean, it's the reason why Act on Mass exists. It's important for a lot of us here. I mean, that was one of the reasons why we, endorsed who we did for a state legislature. This will not fix all of the problems with where laws die without reason. Stuff goes into committee, never comes out, and there's no reason for it. Laws don't pass, and there's no roll call, so you don't know why. You don't know where the failure point are. Those are separation of powers issues that will require probably different solutions than the auditor. So this will not solve all the accountability problems with the state legislature. It won't solve all the transparency problems with the state legislature. But the reason why I support it myself is that I think at least opening up, like John said, the financial side, where the taxpayer money is going with the legislature, is one part of improving the kind of unaccountable black box that we have there.
Great point.
The other thing about question 1 is it's passed muster with the Attorney General's office to get on the ballot. So there may be court challenges after it passes or fails, but presumably it's going to pass. I think there's that's predictions that I've read about, that the only opposition is from the State House.
Yeah, there isn't much of an organized opposition on that front. It was interesting. I don't know if folks have gotten like the Red Book, Galvin, like the kind of information for voters guide, that there was not an organized kind of opposition committee on that front. That the organized opposition for 2 is largely the constellation of like charter school ed reform type folks, often funded by kind of the business community. That it's basically question 2 is in some ways a flip of the sides from question 2 in 2016. In terms of who's funding things. Question 3 has an opposition, and I don't know who. I haven't looked at their funding. Question 4, I don't think question 3. Question 3 doesn't have an organized opposition that I know of. The opposition in the ballot, which is Mass Fiscal Alliance, which I don't know if they're spending anything on that, but I don't know. I haven't seen like a heavy spending opposition. Question 4 I know has an opposition ballot committee, but I haven't seen. My impression with question 3 is Uber and Lyft have chosen not to spend against it because they are probably going to sue and try to block it as long as they can, because that's cheaper. Then question 5, the opposition is largely funded by the restaurant industry.
Thanks.
No problem.
All right.
Well, question 4, while we were talking, you mentioned mescaline and where it comes from, because these all have to be natural sources.
Yeah.
There are 7 kinds of cactus that produce this kind of psychotropic effect or whatever. One of them is peyote.
Yeah, that peyote was what I was trying to think of. That was like, I know that it's one that has like a term that like people that actually like people have heard of.
I know John in the chat earlier, Felix mentioned that the presentation that you ran earlier, if there was some way you could make that, did you make that available? Just
no, but I'll share it with you guys afterwards. So
okay, good.
Feel free to send it out as
Right.
notes.
Yeah, it's a nice handy reference.
Yeah. By the way, on the psychotropics, now with some of them, I mean, in a clinical setting, it's one thing, but if it said something about it at home. So if somebody's taking it and then decides to get in the car and their perceptions are really altered, are there any safeguards? I mean, somebody could get really badly hurt just because their perceptions are altered and they're out driving.
So, one is kind of, I don't know, as somebody who's never done anything, I don't know exactly what the exact amounts for the kind of the limited for use. Some of the things when it comes to kind of safety, etc., it requires the kind of the commission that's being created of it to issue safety recommendations. So if kind of on specific things of how you can make sure of dealing with that, it is a part of kind of the purview of the regulatory structure
Yeah,
being
I'm a
created by
professional.
it.
So in other words, even if it passes, that doesn't mean people can start, growing it or using it at home. Still going to be review committees and safeguards, and then further laws about how it's used. Is that correct?
Exactly. So like I would expect to see, particularly with that, creating a commission to make recommendations in a number of areas, I would expect them to want to then create additional aspects of a regulatory framework after that passes.
Okay,
It's
so it
only
would
available in a
allow-
clinical setting. There's no like
No, it did
marijuana
say-
shops going to open up for
not
these.
outside, but it did say something about people being able to use it, not just getting it prescribed by, clinician, but that maybe I misread it, but it said that people could grow it and use it at home, which sounded
But
like
then it has like a very limited, I don't know what kind of the meanings of the exact amounts are, but it's something that like it would be a fairly limited thing because you still wouldn't be able to, you don't have retail shops. So that kind of a widespread basis of that would not use, basically on that tends to be I think like a limited decriminalization of things that might already be happening is that kind of decriminalization on that front, knowing that some people are already using these, decriminalize narrowly on that basis, but push the kind of make sure that the use is predominantly in a heavily kind of regulated framework.
Yeah, and if it allows for more research and stuff, that's great. I mean,
Yeah.
the only thing the way I read it, as I said, maybe I misread it, but it sounded like that people could, I don't mean that they grow enough to, send, to become dealers, but even if, but if they're able to use, I mean, depending on the amount and depending on a person's tolerance, some people could have quite a, altered perception. And then if they decide, I'm going to go out and drive my car and I see rabbits or whatever, the positives are now outweighed by, the negatives. So that would be my concern, not because I have any moral objections, but
and I think that's really fair. And then they're definitely needed for some like safety regulations. The thing I would say to that is, considering that despite the drugs being technically illegal, people still have
people are doing it anyway. Yeah,
exactly. That like you could already, even with it being illegal, have somebody do it and then driving. So that means that like you need good regulations on the road to govern.
Well, yeah, I'd like to see the real I'd like to see it studied in regulations.
Yeah.
I mean, not being criminalized, but the other side of it. But
Aaron,
some
if
way
you
to
need any recommendations about really good documentaries about this kind of thing, there's a couple on Netflix that are really, really good that I'd be happy to share with you if you want.
Oh, I mean, send them to me too. I'd be curious.
Sure.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yep.
Ryan, actually.
Sorry, I'm going to nitpick as well. This is just one other thing, but do you know if there are any safeguards in to protect endangered cacti that produce these psychotropic chemicals? Because I know at least a couple of them have become endangered through over-harvesting, because we kind of have a thing with letting nihilists spoil everyone's good time.
That I genuinely don't know, but I think that's like a valid thing for like future study of making sure. But I just honestly don't know on that point.
Fair enough.
Ryan, on that regard, members of my family, let's just say, are very interested in this topic. And the documentaries that I just mentioned also cover that a little bit.
Oh,
so
interesting.
I can give you that information.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excuse me, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Who's speaking?
Hi, yeah, it's Felix. I'm tuning in from my phone because my computer exploded. I'm sorry if I'm interjecting, but I was really curious about the history of question 5. I don't know if it's been introduced in Massachusetts before or who introduced it, but I am really interested in knowing if who introduced the bill, how to get onto the ballot.
Yeah, so that in terms of the ballot, so legislation on ending sub-enrichments, that's been something ongoing for a while. There's been legislation that has existed in the state house over terms, like a number of terms. Pat Jalen has been the the sponsor in the Senate, and I believe Trisha Farley Bouvier has been a lead sponsor in the House before. I believe Sam Montano is one of the leads in the House, but is new, and I think Brandy Fluke or Oakley has been in the past as well. And that of addressing the tipped wage was something that was largely left out of the grand bargain that got passed in 2018, which is what raised the minimum wage. It passed paid family and medical leave, and it had to give something to the retailers, made the sales tax holiday something permanent, and then also did unfortunately eliminate like time and a half on Sundays and holidays from the grand bargain in 2018. That deal raised the tipped minimum wage over time to the $6.75 that it is now, but it did not close the gap in full between that and the kind of $15 kind of minimum wage that exists. That in terms of the ballot push, the organization One Fair Wage, which is the national organization that works on this issue across states, was the main one behind this push, which has been kind of behind ballot initiatives in several states.
That is very interesting. I'll make sure to look into that further because that's the question I've seen most opposition to. I was out dining with my British friend the other day, and he was shocked. He said they still have tip credit in this state. I said, yes, they have tip credit in most states. So I've seen a lot of opposition and interesting opinions about this question. So I was, curious about its history in Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's one that because of like how intense kind of restaurant world is against it is definitely, I feel like one that one that's been getting a lot of buzz. Victoria.
Yeah, as a former restaurant owner, I would actually be freaking out if my my costs for employees, more than doubled. But then as a waitress, a former waitress, I would be so excited. It's a lot of work. And back, I think it was 2012, I was working at Lex in Lexington, and I was making $3 an hour.
Oh wow!
But we did, I mean, with tips, I did make more than minimum wage, but still, I've been shocked to see, like I think on GBH and stuff or NPR, they would have, bartenders and waitresses saying they didn't want this to happen. And I'm like, that's crazy. But as a restaurant owner, I completely understand. You definitely will have to raise your prices when you factor in.
Mm-hmm.
But I was curious on your presentation, the charts, it said that restaurants are thriving. And I'm curious about that, but I'll look more into that.
Yeah, and then the one thing as well that I think is important, particularly to make sure that it's not like hitting restaurants too hard, it's a 5-year phase-in for this. So it allows that so that like it doesn't go to suddenly like doubling in a year, which is like if it was doubling in a year, I could understand how like that would freak people out. But it's like a series of phases, like kind of a series of year phase-in, so that can allow for like an adjustment period.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, because like no,
one day you're gonna have to like
15 in 1 year is like that. I can understand the like total freak out that one would see on that. I see Amy.
I think it's further complicated in Lowell because Lowell is in a particular bubble where the rents are accelerating in a way that nightlife in this town can't really keep up with downtown. Effectively, the streets roll up for a lot of things at 10 p.m. here, and that limits the kind of revenue that a lot of restaurants and nightclubs can take in. I know that there's been some push to relax some of the noise laws, but they're still pretty strict regarding live music and what kind of decibels you're allowed to have past that hour.
And that's actually kind of a good point when it comes to like, there are a number of other laws that are like, have no actual, that are like, can often be arbitrary, that if relaxed could actually help kind of restaurants with more like that. I remember, Boston, I think however many years ago, I think passed something to allow more like open mic nights and stuff like that. That there are various things that you can do, that you could do that actually where you have laws that limit like kind of things that limit hours, etc., that kind of artificially constrain how much money a restaurant can take in, but that laxing them make a lot of customers very happy. and can ensure that revenue is solid.
Also, we have very little public transit. I shouldn't say no, but it's not the greatest.
No.
But I see Amy's note about a time check, and one thing I'll just note, if folks have any other questions, I'm dropping in my email in the chat, and I'll be sharing the slide deck with folks as well.
Awesome. Thanks, John.
Great. All right, it is now 6:56. So we are coming up on to the end of our meeting. I'm going to be switching back to my screen here.
Can you send the slides to all of us on the email, or how are we going to get the copy
We'll
of?
be putting it in with the notes. So when we send out the next newsletter, it'll be included with that.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
No problem.
All right. Thank you very much, John.
And thank you all for having me.
Briefly, can I have one last question? Is there, for question 5, will we be seeing vote yes ads on TV to counter the ones we're seeing now?
That's a good question that I don't know the answer to, but
Okay.
I can ask.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks, everyone.
All right. The next meeting will be in October. The October meeting is on October 27th, 5:30 p.m. Topic was yet to be determined, as is whether it will be a Zoom only meeting or a hybrid meeting. Policy is that if COVID cases are up, we'll meet by Zoom only, and even with hybrid meetings, if you feel sick, please attend remotely. You can join us online, join our Facebook page, facebook.com/solidarityLowell. Public events, photos, and more, but no discussions or members only events. Join the Facebook group to participate in discussion, access all of our events, including members only. Visit our website, solidaritylowell.com. Follow us on Instagram, X, Twitter, Threads, @SolidarityLowell. Watch meeting recordings on YouTube and on LTC. Thank you very much all for attending. Thank you, John, for joining us this evening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for coming,
Thank
everyone.
you so much,
Good night.
everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everyone.